Welcome. Thank you for coming tonight. We are excited to have David Wheeler here from Therapy Gardens to talk to us about cannabis, THC, CBD, CBN, everything we wanted to know for grown-ups. Therapy Gardens offers workshops on cooking, gardening, and healthy living, and they pride themselves on top-notch presentations and workshops. They also offer lunch and learn and hands-on activities to libraries, senior centers, community centers around the Commonwealth. We are recording for broadcast on Wakeham, our local cable access station. We will also have it on our YouTube page. And if you're joining us via Zoom, please put your questions in the chat and I will raise my hand and ask them. Feel free to ask questions at any point during Dave's talk. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Courtney. It's great to be here. And yeah, I don't mind. I've never met a microphone I didn't like, so that's fine. So welcome, everyone at home, welcome. So this is, this is my little company, Senior Youth Therapy Gardens. We've been doing this for about 3 years now. And the senior youth side does mostly current events, technology, things like that. And then Therapy Gardens does wellness and cooking and gardening. And some of the topics cross over between the two, of which cannabis is clearly one. It probably is the best one that crosses over between the two things, current events and gardening. So this came about, this presentation, primarily my work is in senior centers and over 55 condos and places like that, hence the name Senior U. But we also do a lot of work with libraries and garden clubs and things like that. So a little of this is geared towards the senior population, but it's applicable to everybody. There are some things in here that I try to avoid my opinion, but I'm Italian, so so it's pretty almost impossible to do. But I do try to do that, but I do give you the facts. And one of the things that I've learned, we do a talk on artificial intelligence, and that was the one I did this morning. And one of the things that I do with that presentation is I've stopped updating it as far as the news, daily, weekly, monthly, because it changes so fast. I'm getting there with cannabis. There's so many new discoveries and new things that are coming out. In fact, I didn't catch your name, I'm sorry. Sarah. So that's my ex-wife's name. I won't hold it against you. So no, Jesus me. So I kind of just chit-chatted with Sarah, and it sounds like some of the topics here she could teach herself. And that's the beauty, I think, of the internet and artificial intelligence, and all this opening up of research and information that we're finding. But it also works both ways, because there may be some things that you're really excited about that you think are great, and then as the research comes out, it doesn't necessarily bear those things out. And I think we all have to learn to start thinking like scientists and being able to be open-minded about our positions and say, I think maybe I was wrong on that. The evidence is clearly the other way. So, and we'd have a better world if people could do that. So just a few kind of disclaimers before I go on. We are not affiliated with any cannabis related enterprise at all. None. We don't have any, we don't take any sponsorships or anything like that. It's completely, we're just ourselves. That's it, self-funded. And though I am extremely charming, my mom told me that, I'm not a doctor or a nutritionist. I am thorough with my research. I want you to ask any questions or comments, as we go through. Feel free, jump right in. And if you want a copy of the presentation, I'm more than happy to send it to you. Just shoot me an email and I have a PDF ready to go, and I'll just send it right off to you. So some of this, for some of you may be a little bit redundant, but it's always helpful to kind of blow through some of the things that people ask a lot about, just to kind of get on the same page. So we know cannabis and marijuana they're not the same. You tend to use the terms interchangeably. It's a lot like when I do the cooking classes and I do soup, and people will say, well, is it stock or is it broth? And what's the difference? And there's a fine difference between the two, but we use them interchangeably. And there's more than a fine difference between cannabis and marijuana, but we still do use them sometimes interchangeably. And even I will slip into it on occasion. But, the fact of the matter is cannabis refers to everything. So cannabis is the whole plant, everything that's in it. And marijuana is parts of the plant that contain some of these cannabinoids that you that will affect your body in different ways. So, and by the way, I love these pictures. I go out on the internet, some of them I took actually, but some of them I go out and I get them on Canva or something like that. But it's a beautiful plant when you look at it, from a gardening perspective. And I'll tell you, when I first started this business, Therapy Gardens, I have a lot of friends who work for the city of Brockton. And I was all excited, and I would put them on my mailing list and send them all my stuff. And no one ever responded to me. And one day I was like, hey, you guys, like, I used to work with you guys, and you're not even responding to my business. Like, come on, help me out. And as it turns out, I was being blocked because Therapy Gardens, they thought it was a marijuana company. Which I was like, that's not a bad idea. That's a pretty good name for that. So the cannabis plant contains more than 100 compounds or cannabinoids, you've heard them called. There's probably more than 100 by now. They're constantly discovering new ones, new things that they do, different ways they affect us, different ways they affect different people. That's the kind of the latest research now, is different people are having different effects to we learned that through COVID. We learned that different people had different effects to that infection. So same thing. You can think of cannabinoids like if you're I'm probably the oldest one in the room, but you might remember back red wine when they were talking about how good red wine was for you and the flavonoids in red wine, and you should be drinking red wine and it's good for you. And what it turned out to be is it was total bull. It's not good for you. None of it is good for you. There's no alcohol that's good for you, no amount. You could get the same benefits from grape juice, and even better, eat the actual grape. You know what I mean? So we'd have to kind of prepare ourselves for that on occasion. And sometimes some negative stuff comes out about cannabis, and we'll talk about some of that at the end. But there's a lot of positive stuff that's going on around about it now too. So, how is it ingested? It can be ingested in several ways. You could, combustion, which is you can smoke it, and whether you use joints, bongs, pipes, whatever, that's fine. You can vape it using what they call electronic vaporizing devices. And you've seen the vape pens. And my poor mom, when she was alive, she thought people were smoking crack. She's like, there's an awful lot of crack smoking about. What are you talking about? So she really did. There was people with these little vape pens. She's like, what crack? But anyway, so I remember I started out saying I try not to give my opinion on things. I'm going to give you my opinion. I don't like vaping. I don't like any of it. I don't recommend it. It's not. I think it's falling out of favor. I don't see it when I go to a dispensary. I don't see people buying it as much anymore. And frankly, it just leads to congestion and lung problems. It just does. So, and they can have all the studies they want that say whatever they say. I know for a fact it does for me, my friends, everyone around me. It's like eventually people are like, this is causing me problems. So I don't recommend it. And then you can mix it into food, drinks, like we've talked about. That appears to be the most popular way right now, particularly for adults, is to do some edibles or drinks or things like that. And there's other ways you can do it too. And then you have it's my grandmother. So this is what I find interesting. So for this particular, study, we're talking actually about 55 and over. So I just in July, I'll be 55. So we'll say that I'm part of this, right? By every single measure, cannabis acceptance and use is on the rise amongst older people. Every single measure. An increasing percentage of older adults report using cannabis exclusively for therapeutic purposes, which can be sleeping, relaxing, pain, anxiety, right? Any of those things fall under the category of therapeutic. Anything that's helpful to you is therapeutic, right? So they were most likely to use it for some of those things I just said, chronic pain, depression, et cetera, et cetera. And a growing body of research shows that it improves their quality of life and increases their physical activity. Now, the opposite is true of younger people. When you look at younger people and the data that you look at there, it does not increase physical activity, and it doesn't necessarily always improve their lives. Sometimes it does, but for the most part, it doesn't. My opinion on that is the older folks understand how and when to use things, and the younger people are still trying to figure it out and, figure out where the line is, I think older folks kind of learn where the line is over time. Kind of the history. The earliest mention of it is actually in China in the oral records, where they used it for medicine, rope, food, things like that. So it really goes, way, way back. Then in the 1850s, it arrived in the US, but that was more the hemp and things like that. It didn't start becoming smokable marijuana until the early 1900s, when it was popularized and brought over by Mexican immigrants. And it is a Mexican word, marijuana. It's a Mexican word. And ever since I learned that, I went through this phase where I was watching old Westerns, and it was kind of an embarrassing phase, to be honest with you. But I started watching all these old Westerns to the point where a bunch of them, they would, go out and smoke pot, and I'd be like, that's wrong. Marijuana didn't arrive until the early 1900s around here, so Hollywood needs to get it right. But the timeline to legalization is something else that I find really interesting when you look at how it's come about and how it's happened. And I think we're at the tipping point, and again, this is my opinion, we're at the tipping point in this country where we know the majority of adults want it legal, or at least are not invested in it one way or the other. They're fine with people doing what they want to do. It's just a matter of the rest of the government kind of catching up to that. And that the tipping point is very, very close. But it was banned in 1911. And then this is what I find the most interesting. And this is why I don't subscribe to the theory that like everyone's going to do everything the way they're supposed to do it. Like a lot of times things get muddled up along the way. And I was only, 3 years old then, but I've read about it. So Nixon appoints this commission, and the commission says unanimously, make it legal. You're ridiculous, make it legal. And he goes completely the other way and supports criminalizing and completely ignored his own commission. So that always made me, a little suspect that there was some behind the scenes maneuvering there that, really didn't need to be. And then you saw the state started stepping up. So then you saw, our own state didn't really get into it until the medical and the recreational. But in the 70s, you had a lot of states start to decriminalize it. Then in 2012, recreational cannabis begins. You have 27 states in DC have now decriminalized it, and it's still illegal at the federal level. Foolish, absolutely foolish. Didn't I say I wasn't going to get my opinion? Timeline to legalization in Mass. So again, the big thing here is this 2016, when the recreational cannabis is legalized. In 2018 is kind of when the floodgates open. And you happen to see, I'm actually going to jump ahead one slide, the sales revenue. So currently, right now in Mass, there are about 400 licensed marijuana retailers, and it fluctuates here and there. This I just updated. A year ago, I did this presentation, and that said annual sales were 3 billion. Annual sales are now 4 billion. So it's climbing. The only thing, the reason I think it's not in the news as much of how much of money it has made and generated is because legalized gambling has eclipsed it. And I think everyone's kind of looking at legalized gambling now as kind of the next great thing, whereas at least around here, marijuana is, now there's a dispensary everywhere. So the tax revenue, there's an additional 10%, and this revenue under the law is supposed to go to the Massachusetts General Fund, the MBTA, and the School Building Authority. The School Building Authority and the MBTA, that's where a lot of lottery money goes. A lot of the lottery money goes to that. So I'm glad to see some of that go. The general fund can, make you a little nervous. What goes, who has discretion over the general fund? I don't know too much about that, but that's where it goes. So Massachusetts legalities. So you have to be 21 or older to buy or use it. Any marijuana use is not allowed on public or federal lands. Landlords and employers can have their own policies, and this is where you start to see the disconnect between the law and really insurance regulated. It's really not, you know, I'll use Home Depot as an example. I don't think the executives at Home Depot are overly concerned about it. I think it's the insurance companies that are saying you have to drug test, you can't let people, you know, they're operating machinery and things like that. So you do have this kind of a disconnect where, you know, you're allowed, it's legal to do, but you could still lose your job in some instances for doing it. So, you know, we'll see what happens with that. As far as personal growth, you're allowed, or personal carrying around, you're allowed to have an ounce. You can grow six plants or up to 12 if you have 2 adults in your home. Don't know how they police that. I've tried to find, like, do they even check it? You know, for example, where I'm in Brockton, there was a big uproar over chickens, right? A lot of people like to keep chickens, and we're an immigrant community, and there's a lot of families coming in that want to keep chickens. But Brockton is also a city, so there's, you know, some problems there. So I think they copped out. What the city did was they had all these complaints from people that were saying, these chickens are bringing rats. And then they had all these people saying, I have a right to have chickens. You know, what do you, and so they took the middle road and they said, you must have a license to have chickens. And that was it. There was no criteria. There was nothing drawn out. How many chickens can you have? Where can they be? There was nothing. It was, you just have to notify the city that you have chickens. And that was it. So when you look at how much marijuana you can grow, I kind of liken it to the chickens. I mean, is anyone really running around and counting how many marijuana plants people are growing? I just don't know. It's one of those things government kind of sometimes overstretches, and they put things in there that they really can't enforce. This really, how would you enforce that? So interesting. Now, this is where it gets really interesting locally. Municipalities can limit the number of marijuana licenses to 20% of liquor licenses if the community voted it in. If the community voted it down, they don't have to let any in. Now, that 20% has been, that's a very interesting thing that they picked. So I want you to think about, let's think about Wayland. You know, how many liquor stores are in Wayland? When you say liquor licenses, what they mean, they don't mean restaurants. They mean what we would call in New England a packy, right? A packet, that's what they mean. So how many, I mean, what would you say in Wayland? Yeah, 4?
I mean, what I know
I
for.
think like 3, yeah, 3.
Okay, so let's be generous and say 5, right? You say 5, so you're gonna get 1 dispensary, if it were voted. I don't know how this one voted, but you get 1 dispensary.
It wasn't allowed.
It wasn't allowed. Shocked. So now I'm in Brockton. How many liquor stores do you think we have?
A lot.
A lot. So the city council decided, well, we'll give 10. And they actually, I have to hand it to them, is they decided we would give 2 to each ward. We have north, south, east, west, and then 2 to downtown, you know, something like that. And I was like, that makes perfect sense. So they did it. They went through the whole thing. They heard 20 people that came before them. They had a criteria and they granted 10 licenses. Well, the 10 people that didn't get it raised holy hell and pointed to this and said, you can grant up to 20%, and there's probably 100 liquor stores in Brockton. So we can have 20 things. So the city council there, and again, I was impressed with their thinking. They came back to these groups and said, we understand. However, your proposal wasn't even good enough to make the first cut. There were 10 others better than you. We're already putting 10 companies out here selling marijuana. You want us to add another 10. So now your proposal was already weaker, so your business is probably already going to be weaker. And now there's 20 of you competing in Brockton. And they said, we don't care. And the city council said, okay, and gave it to them. And what do you think has happened? There's marijuana stores everywhere. And now, actually, if you want to get deals, go to Brockton, because they're all undercutting each other now. But it's very interesting that, but now you look at, so now Brockton gets 20 or 10, or, you know, whatever it is, and Wayland gets none. It does, to me, it seems a little odd, you know, as it shakes
What's the
out.
population of Brockton?
100,000. About 100,000.
We're only 13,000.
Right. Yeah, it just, I don't know, it just seems, I guess I like the idea that where it was voted down, there's some, but I think people might want to revisit that too, because I think a lot of people didn't realize what was at stake when they were voting. No one really said, well, this is what we're gonna do. If you vote it down, you're never gonna have it, but your neighbor is.
Well, it
And
also
that's-
makes no sense to make it against a liquor store. One doesn't have anything to do with the other.
I think it was what all they could track. I think they were looking for, what's something that we already issue. So the question is, the liquor store, it doesn't seem like how do they correlate? And they don't. It just seems to me, that was how I took it, was, well, that's an entity they're already regulating. There's already a lot of things in place for that, safeguards and such. They know how many there are. They probably ran the numbers and said, at most, we would end up with this many dispensaries, so it looks okay to us. Not thinking of what would happen patchwork, So that's all right, we'll learn. We'll get better as we go. All right, so kind of the major strains, there's really only 3 strains that you want to be concerned about. And everything I say for these next 3 slides, and the 4th slide will tell you this, I take it with a grain of salt. It's not necessarily as rock solid as some folks will have you believe. But the fact is, sativa is the strain that has the highest amount of THC. It produces what they say is a more energizing high. It can be improved focus, productivity, creativity. You see a lot of like artists and writers and things that will kind of indulge in that type of thing. It's the largest crop. It's very, very tall. Things to watch out for. If you are someone that's like, doesn't like to be in your head, and then you do that, that you might not enjoy it. If you have, mild paranoia or anxiety, this might exacerbate it a little bit, you just want to kind of keep that in mind. If you're a new user or, returning after a long time, that was kind of me. I probably had done it a few times in high school and then, believe it or not, stopped all through college and then didn't pick it up again until I was in my 40s, I think. And I did have that, to be honest with you. I had a little bit of kind of paranoia. My first year or two, I can't believe I'm saying this on camera. I would smoke a little bit, and then I would get paranoid and I would hide whatever I had left. But then I'd forget where I hid it. And then the next day I'd open up the cabinet, oh my, there's a so anyway, some of the fun you have with it. So some of the other strain, the indica. So this is the one that, they'll tell you is to calm you down, and, it's less cerebral, more what they would call kind of a body high, a relaxation. Obviously beware of sleepiness. That's the thing for this, if that's the strain for you. And then you have hybrid. And then hybrid is, I like to kind of explain hybrid as, it's sort of like tomatoes, that they take heirloom tomatoes and they take the best parts of the heirloom tomato and they take another tomato that has some strengths that the heirloom tomato doesn't have, and they breed them together and they make like a super tomato that's resistant to disease and wilt, but is very, you always know what you're gonna get. It's gonna always look the same. So that's a lot of what they do with the hybrids is they graft things. And there's actually another strain down the bottom here called Cannabis ruderalis. And that's actually, they use that as a grafting plant. So it doesn't have a lot of the cannabis properties or anything. So they mostly use it for breeding. They grow the stalk and graft other things onto it. So, you just want to kind of keep in mind that take the grains with a, take the grains. Take the strains with a grain of salt. Different people have different reactions. You have some people that will, try just a little bit of something and have a very strange reaction. Then you have some people that can, consume large amounts of it, and same as alcohol. You have some people that can drink a lot of alcohol and look like they haven't had any. And then you have those poor people that get the alcohol flush. They have one sip of red wine and they're bright red, So, it's the same thing with this. You have some people that I recommend, if you haven't done it before and you want to try an edible or something, just break it in half and just try half first and wait an hour and try again, if you don't feel anything. Some other, some of the active things that you want to talk about, I think you guys all know this, but THC is the one that causes the psychoactive compound. And what we were talking about earlier was there's this kind of, I hesitate to call it a loophole, but it's almost like the same as non-alcoholic beer where it still has like 0.01% of alcohol, so there's still some THC in some of the CBD that gets sold, but it's a minimal amount, so it's not supposed to affect you, and it flies under the radar as far as regulatory things go. You'll find a lot of unscrupulous companies will take that THC and sell it in large volumes and say, oh, it'll get you high, but you have to eat a pound of it, or so, because it's, no one's going to do that, so. And then I also tell people, like with CBD, avoid the gas station CBD, it's everywhere, and it's not regulated, it's not of quality control, it's not of quality. One of the things I always talk about, not just with marijuana, but with food, with everything. There was a recall, I don't know if you saw this, on applesauce. Mott's applesauce about 2 or 3 months ago. And all these little kids were getting sick. And they're like, oh my God, why are these kids getting sick? So they traced it to the applesauce. They traced it to the cinnamon in the applesauce. And there was lead in the cinnamon. And the kids were getting lead poisoning. So they published the brand of cinnamon, and they published the stores that carry this brand of cinnamon. Dollar General, Dollar Tree, Family Dollar, Walmart. So I always look at that when something is the very, very, very low end, I'm suspicious. Just like when it's the very, very high end, I'm suspicious, right? I try to look for things. I do the same with CBD. I don't actually use CBD. I do smoke marijuana occasionally. I don't even do edibles, mostly because I'm almost a diabetic, so I'm trying not to do that. But if I actually, there's one dispensary that I buy from, there's a brand that I stick with, I'm loyal to. If it's not there, it's not the end of the world, but it's kind of that, I'm kind of this, like with coffee. I have my brand, I know I buy organic coffee that I know is free trade, I like that. I like knowing that stuff. So I encourage people to do that, find a dispensary or, a whole, even CBD that people make at home can be a very high quality too. You just want to find a very high quality source for it. So it's usually an oil, but you can get it as, we've talked about vaporized liquids. You can get it as capsules, you can get it as extracts. You can use it as, tinctures. You can do all kinds of things with CBD. So the best way to take it is orally in pill form. So that so far has been the way that they found the most benefit. Now, that said, I do have to say there's a lot of hype about CBD, a ton of hype. And and this is, I mentioned, I was down the Cape and someone who owned a CBD company came up to me, and here's where he changed me. This line said, there is limited scientific evidence. And then after I spoke to him and he sent me some information and I read it and I digested it, I nudged a little. So now there's moderate scientific evidence that CBD can improve sleep disorders. It does some stuff for muscle spasticity. It helps with anxiety. Here's the issue. There's not enough studies. There's more coming, and they're very, very promising. Now, that said, if you have the study that they did do that is very important is if you have a diagnosed sleep disorder or a diagnosed anxiety disorder, there is a study that supports CBD use. It's very small. That's the problem. It's just a very, very small study because it's hard to find. Most people self-report all this stuff. So it's hard to find a study where someone's willing to go through and report, everything that they do, et cetera, et cetera. So you just, you want to keep that in mind, but there is a ton of studies being conducted now, and the research is very promising. That said, let's look at a little reality. And I like to give, I have to be honest. 1 in 10 people who have substance use disorder are going to get addicted to marijuana. It's just going to happen. And these are the folks that are probably going to get addicted to most anything. They're probably going to get addicted to alcohol if it's put in front of them, or, if they choose to do some other type of drug, or some people replace it with sugar, but we know that there are addicted people, and we know that they can get addicted. So when people say it's non-addictive, it's not necessarily non-addictive. You could say it's not addictive for the majority of people, but you can't say that across the board it's not addictive. The second bullet point is the most important one. So there is a permanent IQ loss of young people that smoke marijuana. It can be THC can be very, very harmful to the teenage brain. They should not smoke marijuana. Now, I was a high school principal. I know what they're doing. You know what I mean? I understand. I know what I did, when I was in high school. I get it. We've sent the message that it's fine. We just, whether we want to admit that or not, we have sent that message, just like we've sent the message that drinking alcohol is fine to young people. We've sent that message. That said, as long as we're, paying attention to it and not blinding ourselves to the research, and the research on the still forming brain is that it's dangerous. We have to be honest about that. There are some studies that link it to, and this is a lot of the people that are opposed to marijuana like to cite these studies, that marijuana is linked with depression, anxiety, suicide. But we don't know if those people had those feelings and then sought marijuana out to feel better, or if marijuana caused those feelings. It's pretty, I think, clear that they sought out treatment. They were self-medicating for themselves. We see that. And research shows that people who use marijuana, this is cumulative over a period of time when marijuana was illegal. So you can also attribute some of this to, relationship problems, worse educational outcomes, and lower career achievement, because they were doing something that at the time was illegal. Whereas now it doesn't necessarily have that stigma, and they're not going to get arrested for it and lose a job. Think about it that way. So there's, times are changing. The research is slow to catch up sometimes, And then just to kind of go back again, right back to the seniors though, when you get back to people older, they are very successful with using marijuana, extremely successful. I always like to show this, bud tenders are what they're called when you go into a dispensary. And they don't really look like this. Although I will say, the one that's near me in Brockton is very, very, very youth oriented, and I hate going in there. I hate it, but it's close. And, I suck it up and do it. I don't like the music. I don't, everyone looks like they're 12, but now there have been other days that I've gone in there, like during the weekday, and I've been the youngest customer in there. Like I've seen a lot of older folks in there too. So the only thing with bud tenders, you just want to remember they don't have a lot of credentials. Some of them are starting to get educated, and you're seeing college majors pop up, and that's absolutely starting. The vast majority of them are self-taught. We just want to remember that. Most of them, I mean, if you walk in the door and you say, "Oh, I'm having trouble sleeping," before you even get the word sleeping out of your mouth, they're gonna go, "You want indica?" Well, maybe you don't want indica, maybe it's something. So there's a little bit of that going on. That said, when you find a dispensary that has knowledgeable people that will sit and talk to you, and for example, I have an issue with flavorings. I hate them. And that's in everything now, right? I hate it in my coffee. I don't want fruit in my beer. I don't drink, but I don't, I just don't, I'm a purist, I would call it. There's only one or two people at the dispensary that I go to that know what I'm talking about when I say, look, I don't want that perfumey stuff. That's what I say. And there's only a couple of them that know. Some of them just aren't that interested in. So it pays to find a good dispensary, All right, reliable information. Everything that I get pretty much from these three sites, with the bottom site being the Harvard Medical School Health Publishing being my primary site for information for almost everything I do. If you haven't seen that website, it's fantastic. It's just loaded with health and wellness things. You can create a custom email newsletter for yourself around all kinds of wellness stuff that you're interested in. It's really good. The only downside is they are constantly trying to sell you something. So that's the kind of goes with it. The other two are government agencies, and I use these two on purpose. I use this one because it's more or less pro marijuana, because it's obviously the Cannabis Control Commission for this state. And I use the Centers for Disease Control because it's more or less anti-marijuana, because it's a federal agency. So they still are kind of, towing the federal line on that, and being very slow to change. But again, I try to look at all sides of things, so for me, that works. I feel like I'm kind of getting the full picture. Just like with my own news, like I read the Wall Street Journal, kind of get a little right leaning stuff, and then I read the New York Times, a little left leaning stuff. And I feel like between the two, I get them all. I love the New York Times the best, but I make myself read the Wall Street Journal. All right, just before we kind of get to any questions or comments or things like that, I just like to give people some visuals. You guys probably aren't going to need this, but folks at home might appreciate it as well. This is always interesting when I show the older folks this, and they aren't as up to date as some of us are, and they're like, "What is that thing in the middle?" And I have to explain to them, when we use it, it was a squiggly white pin thing, and like, oh, so they know, but they're just not used to the pre-roll that you see, and then obviously the bong and the glass pipe. These are the vaporizers. Again, I just don't recommend them. I thought about kind of deleting them from the slideshow altogether, but I'm trying to be objective and down the middle on some things. So it is out there. It is a product. It's not necessarily a product that I recommend. It does have. I was trying to find reasons to kick it out, so I was like, "It's got terpenes. I knew it, terpenes." And I went, I'm like, "That's it." I got them, and I looked it up. It's just natural flavorings. That's all terpenes are. But I thought for sure I have. I was like, "Give it up, terpenes." Tinctures. Really good if you don't want edibles, if you don't want to smoke something, if you don't want a lot of paraphernalia laying around, these are little small bottles, a little pricey, but they last a long time. You can get them as just CBD, you can get them with THC and CBD, you can get just THC. You put a couple drops under your tongue, wait a little while. They do work. I've used them, THC, not CBD. If you're someone that has a little bit of a tolerance, they're not so great because you end up doing like 5 or 6 drops, then you have oil kind of sitting in your stomach. It doesn't feel great. So if you're somebody that like you just want a little drop here and there, this could really work for you. And then of course there's the edibles that everyone is, pretty much interested in these days. You have to remember that people digest things differently, so you can hit you in 30 minutes, it can hit you in 2 hours, or it cannot hit you at all. And that happens too. When I worked at a high school, we had a real problem with kids taking edibles and not feeling anything, and then taking a bunch more, and then hitting them all at once. We actually had to drop instruction for one whole homeroom morning to give a lesson on biology, on how food flows through your body, so that the kids would understand, stop taking triple doses of it. If you got, not that we wanted them to do it, but but that's what was happening. We were having a rash of that, So, one dose is generally 10 milligrams. You can break it in half and try, half at first if you want. And I used to have, I took it out, but I had a recipe in here for if you wanted to make your own edibles. It's really simple to do. You just infuse the marijuana in the butter. That's all you do. So you just simmer the butter and the marijuana, to melt the butter, simmer it in there. But takes a good hour. You got to really let it simmer. The neighbors will smell it. I mean, it's really gonna smell. And then you just strain it out and use the butter to cook in. And it really does work, and it's very, very easy to do. So you do have to, watch for sugar. I mean, you got this one is from a cookie, I think. Yeah, so that's from a cookie. So you've got, 18 grams of carbs. They do have to have these. They have to have nutritional information and things to show you. I like to show, some dispensaries. Occasionally I get a tour if I tell them, I do a talk on cannabis, sometimes I get a tour. Most often I get, yeah, great. But I'll tell you, the marijuana industry is responsible for a lot of advancements in particularly indoor gardening. A lot of these, this doesn't really even do it justice. Now they grow up the walls, and they have the water that, it flows down. They have giant lights on chains that move from room to room. It's really, really incredible. They have full commercial kitchens in there. And they, they have full cutting, drying rooms, and then they bring some stuff down to the kitchen and they make their edibles. It's really quite an operation, some of them. Most of the people, are dressed kind of like this. A lot of them have like the clear handbags and things, because, I imagine theft is an issue for them. Highly, highly regulated as far as, like waste and clippings. They have to weigh them all and they have to log what they throw away, and it's really, really strict. It's overly strict. It's even to the point where you can't have shrubs around a dispensary. You can't, it has to be front lit 24 hours a day. You can't have windows. I mean, they made it seedy. If you know what I mean? Like if they had just let it be natural, I think it would have been fine. But so now you have these like industrial looking places, or they try to make them kind of fancy looking from the outside, but they still have to have blacked out windows and they can't have any, greenery around them, which is a little ironic. Sometimes you see them like this, you see different strains and things like that. You don't really, at least where I'm from, wouldn't see them on display like that, because in Brockton, they probably wouldn't be there very long. So, most places, it's pretty much all digital now too. It's all, touch screens and stuff. You might find an old style one like this. And I like to show pictures again, a lot of my folks that come to these are seniors and they're nervous going inside. So I like them to see it. You know what? I was nervous the first time I went in, when I sat outside for a few minutes, like, am I really doing this? And then I was like, oh my God, stop it. But you do have that. People my age and older, like we were taught it's bad, it's hard to unlearn that. Most of them look more like this. Most of them are white now, not even natural colors. A lot of white and like glass and, like I said, a lot of monitors and things. A lot of the futuristic ones, this is actually an AI mock-up of one in Boston, right on, it was supposed to be on Boylston Street. I don't know if it ever actually opened or not, but you would come in, you have the big round thing and you'd make your order right there. There's one in Brockton, it's called Cannabis, and you have to order through a bud tender, and it's a room like this with some displays, and they walk around with iPads, and I won't go there because I'm not interested. I know what I want. I don't want to talk to anybody. Just give me what I want and leave me alone. But they've taken the approach of upselling, and they're trying to give you the service and all that. And hey, if that's what you want, that's fine. All right, so some final thoughts. So the research on the benefits of cannabis it's absolutely a mixed bag. And it's a mixed bag, because there's like gaps in the research. There's just not a lot that's there. There's some negatives that we have to, confront and be honest about. There are a lot of positives too. Clearly the trend is towards full legalization and acceptance in the US. It's just a matter of time now, I think. The schedule declassification sounds like a really good idea to me. I don't know that much about the DEA schedules and stuff, but I don't think marijuana should be on a schedule of anything. So, hopefully that's a move in the right direction. And what you do is up to you. And I do, always recommend check with your doctor. If you're somebody, particularly if you have other health ailments and you're like, oh, this is going to solve all my problems. Well, let's talk to somebody first about some of those other ailments, some of the other things that you're on, it can interact with other medications. There are people that, for example, I talk with the older folks a lot about if you're on blood pressure medication, sometimes like when you get up, you can get dizzy. And if you take an edible and you forgot you took an edible, you get up an hour later and you're already dizzy from your blood, so you have to be careful of that. So I like to tell people that. And then if you want a copy of the presentation, all you have to do is just go to our website. It's therapygardens.com, and right underneath this is a little form, and just fill it out and say, hey, Dave, send me the cannabis presentation and I'll be happy to send it to you. And we also, our other website is Senior U. So with that, if anyone has any questions or anything like that, or wants to talk about anything, I'd be happy to talk more.
There's one question
Yeah,
online.
sure.
Is it a myth or truth that smoking marijuana can cause lung cancer?
Well, so it's never good when you're bringing smoke into your lungs. It's just never a good thing. there is, that I know of, there's no direct research that marijuana causes lung cancer. It's the carcinogens in cigarettes that cause lung cancer. So I've not seen any research that supports any connection to cancer.
I have a question about CBD and
Yes.
the effect on dermal layer, which is skin. I see a lot of CBD massages in the salons these days,
Yeah.
in spas. How does that really work?
I don't think it does, personally. I'm not convinced that CBD works topically. So that's my big thing. I think it works when you ingest it. Just like I'm not really convinced that like lavender does anything when you topically, other than make you smell nice, you know? So I don't know. There is some research about burns and some work with CBD and burning, but I haven't really followed it that much. Can't hurt. I guess that's what I would say, you know, if it relaxes you, you know, if you like the person and you enjoy it's an afternoon out, and you're like, hey, this is cool, fine. You know,
But
it's
they
not,
charge more for CBD massages.
of course they do. Of course they do, yeah.
There's another question
Sure.
from my audience, and she is asking, all this while, after listening to your episode, I just had this episode, like a podcast episode with Sarah.
Oh, nice. Oh, good.
So she's asking all this while that my friends who were doing, and she's a senior.
Yeah.
So all this while, all the friends who were doing marijuana, were they mellow because they have been using it? Like they seem to be mellow all the time. Mellow in the sense they're like they seem to be softer and
So, well,
that.
I get first, the first thing I'll tell you is age mellows you out automatically. So that's the first thing. I definitely have learned that. You wouldn't want to have known me 20 years ago, you know? So that's the first thing. Everyone reacts differently. I have a feeling it probably does make people mellow, but if she's asking me if all her friends are running around stoned and mellow, that I don't know.
I said the same thing.
Right, yeah.
The third question is about mixing alcohol and smoking.
Yeah, really bad idea.
Because the person had a really bad reaction, and he is afraid to use it again. But he definitely felt like he did a wrong thing with mixing it with alcohol. Like what chemical reaction happens when you're using?
Well, you have ultimately you have a depressant and usually another depressant, really. So you kind of, you know, suppressing emotion and things like that, or you're exacerbating it depending on what kind of a drinker the person is, you know, because it's usually the drinking that causes the loss of, you know, what's the word?
There's something called the crossfade,
Yeah,
which I can support-ish,
Mhm.
but I don't know the science behind it, and I don't know if this is just like a me thing or an
Yeah,
everybody
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
It's supposed to be like the capillaries in your brain.
Dilate?
Cannabis does something to it, which stops the effect of alcohol as much, so you may not feel as drunk, maybe, or it might. Whether that's true or not, but it is never a good idea to drink and then.
So I'm skeptical of that. I'm
yeah.
very, very skeptical of that.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah, that one doesn't fly with me. The answer for me with the drinking and the smoking would be, when I look at, again, maybe an older person that knows how to have 1 or 2 glasses of wine and maybe an edible and enjoy their evening. I don't see an issue with that. When you become a binge drinker and then you're smoking a lot with it, or you're a problem drinker and you're smoking a lot with it, it's just not it's just two things that are not gonna work well for you. You're just not, you know, yeah. Yes,
As someone who hasn't been to any of these dispensaries or since high school,
Yeah.
can you talk about cost? Like I'm sure there's a huge
so,
price
yeah,
range.
so the price range is, you know, it's all over the map. You could buy, let's say, a pre-roll, a small 1 gram pre-roll you could find them for as little as $4 or $6, or as high as, you know, $18 or $25, or I've seen some for 50 that have what they call them, they're infused, they dip them in hash, or they have all kinds of little tricks and things they do with them. I generally find, like I said earlier, I find a brand that I like that I'm just like, you know what, I kind of know what to expect from this brand. You know what, I'm gonna shout them out, Miss Grass. That's the name of the brand. It's for women, and I like it. It's a woman-owned marijuana company, which I didn't know. I actually was attracted to it. The bright colors of, they have like a bright blue, a bright purple, and a bright orange. And I'm into design because I do all the design stuff here. And I was like, that's really cool. I'm gonna try that. And I actually found it to be like just right for me. What didn't make me, you know, crazy, tired. I wasn't coughing. It was just this little small amounts. So lately I'm a fan of finding a brand that works for you. You know, so and I've been doing that with food too. For example, I've been shopping a lot at Whole Foods. And I've been shopping a lot at Whole Foods because Whole Foods has standards for their suppliers and for the food that you eat, and there's things that can't be in it and chemicals and all that stuff. And I'm starting to see that in the marijuana industry now too. So I'm brand loyal, you know.
Dave, in your presentation, I did not see a category of beverage.
A beverage, you know, you guys have me thinking about it. You have to send me some information, you know, like the CBD guy, he changed my mind, so change my mind. Not that my mind is made up in anything. Send me some info. I'd love to look at it. Send me some info on your podcast too. I'll shout it out for you.
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah,
love
I
to.
based my research on Huberman Lab podcast. So if you guys want to listen to and read the research papers, it's all linked in his show notes. Before interviewing her, I needed to do my homework, and that's where I based it. Huberman is a Stanford professor. He runs the Huberman Lab podcast. I'm sure you guys have already heard of it.
You know, it's one of those, it's an area that you have these experts coming out now that are, they're very educated and they're smart, and you have a lot of them study agriculture and horticulture and things like that. And then you have a lot that study like chemistry and things like that. And it's really a fascinating field, I think. If I were a young person, it would be on my list of a, like, kind of a, you know how kids are like, oh, I want to be a nurse, I mean, that would be on my list of somewhere in that, the research, you know, growth area of marijuana. I think it's a frontier. Like artificial intelligence is a frontier. I think this is a frontier. Yeah.
A question from online, can you talk about the munchies? What is that? When do you get that? How does it
So,
work?
so the munchies are, aside, and you know, this is why they used to give, or they still do. They prescribe marijuana to cancer patients who have trouble eating, or patients that have digestive issues,
Or anorexia.
or anorexia, because it stimulates your appetite.
Huh.
And that's one of the side effects of it, is it will stimulate your appetite, and you actually have to work to overcome that if you're someone that, you know, gives into it once in a while, like I am, you know, gummy bears. But yeah, you have to, it's a real thing. It absolutely is a real thing.
Do all the products, all THC products have? it?
Everyone reacts differently. Some of them, I've had some where I've been, oh my God, I'm ravenous. And then I've had others where I haven't eaten all day and I've been like, oh, you know, maybe it was that. I don't know.
There's certain cannabinoids too, like THCV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, you could get deep, you could really get deep into it and say, you know, and that's what a lot of the strains now, the research of that is about, is what does this strain do to this type of person? You know, so we're talking about not only personalized medicine, you could all be talking about personalized recreation, you know, so. All right, any other questions or anything? Thank you so much. You guys have a lovely community here, you really do.